There comes a moment in every nation's history when silence becomes heavier than fear, when people realize that suffering quietly is more dangerous than speaking loudly. For Burkina Faso, that moment arrived the day Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward and told the world what millions had been whispering for decades. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't wave a flag. He didn't surround himself with generals or armored convoys. He simply stood and spoke the truth. And truth, real truth, is louder than any weapon. The crowds felt it first, then the villages, then the cities. Soon, it wasn't just Burkina Faso listening, it was Africa. Because Traoré spoke in a way that generations before him wished they could. He spoke with the honesty of a farmer, the discipline of a soldier, and the fire of a revolutionary. He spoke the words buried in the hearts of every African who ever felt exploited, ignored, humiliated, or betrayed. And when he spoke, it was as if an entire continent exhaled. For the first time in a long time, Africa felt seen. Africa felt heard. Africa felt alive. His speeches were not political statements. They were mirrors. Mirrors that showed Africa a reflection without shame, without fear, without the weight of foreign judgment. He reminded the continent who it truly was, not a pawn, not a battleground, not a charity case, but a giant forced to kneel for too long. And slowly, the giant began to rise. Across West Africa, young men began filming videos, speaking boldly about dignity and independence. Women began organizing communities, building foundations for a stronger future. Youth stood taller, walked prouder, spoke louder. Because courage is contagious. And Traoré carried a kind of courage people could feel, not with their ears, but with their bones. Meanwhile, powerful nations watched nervously. They sent warnings, they sent criticism, they sent pressure through the back doors of diplomacy. But Traoré did not bend. He did not shake. He did not whisper. He stood firm, calm, steady, unmovable, like a tree rooted in the land of his ancestors. And Africa noticed. For the first time in years, young Africans were not looking up to foreign leaders for inspiration. They were looking at one of their own. Traoré became a symbol, not of power, but of possibility. A symbol that a young African can rise, stand tall, and speak truth to the world without bowing. A symbol that Africa can shape its own destiny without being told what it should become. This movement is no longer about politics. It is no longer about speeches. It is no longer about Burkina Faso alone. It is about a continent remembering its potential, its warriors, its kings, its queens, its thinkers, its future. Africa is waking up, and there is no going back to sleep. Traoré knows the road ahead will not be easy. He knows the storms will come. He knows the pressure will intensify. He knows the world will test him, challenge him, try to break him. But he also knows something far more powerful. He is no longer walking alone. Behind him stands a generation with fire in its eyes. Behind him stands millions who refuse to kneel. Behind him stands a continent ready to rise. This is not the end of the story. This is not even close. This is the day Africa stopped being silent, and Ibrahim Traoré was the one who struck the first drum. The next chapters will be louder, stronger, unstoppable, and the world, whether it likes it or not, will have to listen. Because once a people discover their voice, silence becomes impossible. Once a generation discovers its strength, fear becomes useless. And once a continent discovers its identity, control becomes an illusion. Africa has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, a threshold that cannot be reversed. For decades, the world saw Africa through a single lens, a lens shaped by exploitation, by narratives created elsewhere, by hands that fed with one palm and took with the other. But now, that lens is shattered. The world is witnessing a continent no longer asking for respect, no longer begging for partnership, no longer waiting for permission. A continent standing tall and speaking for itself. And this shift did not begin in a palace, nor in a conference room, nor in a foreign institution. It began in the heart of West Africa with a young leader who refused to bow. Ibrahim Traoré did something simple yet revolutionary. He told the truth, and he told it without fear. And when truth is spoken with courage, it becomes a force that spreads, a force that grows, a force that cannot be controlled. Across the continent, the impact is visible. Children are learning the names of African heroes instead of foreign conquerors. Youth are discussing independence instead of escape. Communities are rebuilding confidence that years of manipulation tried to erase. In the streets, you feel it. In the music, you hear it. In the eyes of the people, you see it. A continent awakening from a long, forced sleep. And this awakening is not violent, but powerful. Not chaotic, but determined. Not emotional, but historical. Foreign nations sense the shift. Not because Africa suddenly became stronger, but because Africa finally remembered that it always was. For the first time in a long time, the balance of respect is changing. The tone of negotiation is changing. The relationship between Africa and the world is changing. And one thing is clear. Africa will no longer be spoken for. Africa will no longer be underestimated. Africa will no longer be divided for convenience. Because this movement is not built on a man. It is built on a mindset. A mindset that says, we decide our future. We shape our destiny. We carry our crown. Traoré lit the flame, but the fire now belongs to the people. And once the people carry the fire, no power on earth can extinguish it. The story ahead will be written with courage, with resilience, with unity, with a defiant heartbeat that refuses to slow down. This is not a moment. This is not a phase. This is not a speech that will fade in time. This is a rebirth of pride, a rebirth of identity, a rebirth of a continent ready to take its place in the world, not as a follower, but as a leader. And the world, whether it likes it or not, will stand witness to Africa rising.